Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Ed Delia. I'm the second generation president of the Delia Associates, the place where B2B brands go to grow. I'm really excited about today's guest. He's Paul Steck, who represents the third generation and is president of Exothermic. Exothermic uses a process called reaction injection molding to produce high quality, complex components for highly regulated industries such as medical device, military, robotics, automotive, and many others. They are one of the forerunners in this field and deliver full life cycle services to their clients. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today.
Ed, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Hey, let's start at the beginning. What are some of your earliest memories of whether it be your father or grandfather and the origins of Exothermic?
My earliest memories of manufacturing are being dragged out of bed on a Saturday morning and being told I got to go to bed, go to work when I'm maybe 12 years old.
Okay.
In that age. But yeah, Exothermic was a company that was purchased as an investment by my dad's sheet metal company. They were making CNC mold components for the company at the time was called Artium before my dad bought it. And Artium was asking for a capital infusion, and they were struggling a little bit with the ups and downs of entrepreneurship.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you were 12 and you got pulled into, what were you doing at the age of 12?
Yeah, I was given a rag and a spray bottle and said, go wipe the oil off the machines, and a broom and a dustpan and hand broom and clean the floors, things like that. But also I got to drill holes in metal and tap threads into metal and countersink, and basically repetitive tasks that were not very interesting for a long time. But
Okay, so early exposure. So let me ask you.
Yep. No deburring. Yeah, running a hand file on sharp edges and just stuff like that.
Usual 12-year-old stuff. So I have to ask this question because it's different in different families. I know what it was in mine. Was there the business and family, was it always around? And that was expected of you maybe, but I mean, like around the dinner table, did your folks talk about business? Was it talked about at family gatherings, or was it very much family's family and business is business?
Yeah, both sides of my family were involved in manufacturing and sheet metal and machined metals, precision work. And both families used to go in on the weekend and work as families, and whatever needed to get done to get parts finished or inspected or packed, it was what they did as families. Just coincidentally, they were very similar companies, and both my parents had similar experiences in members of a family business as young people.
So you were roughly 12 when you first started to get your hands dirty in the business. But as you got older, did you always envision a path into the family business, or did you consider other paths first?
Yeah, I did work a lot through high school and get paid a little. After I graduated college, I got my Series 7. I was working in financial planning. I had insurance licenses, equities licenses. I didn't really like that business very much. My dad suggested that I could always give the family business a try, and if it didn't work out for me, I could always leave, but I should at least give it a try.
Wow, so you were heading in a very different path there.
I was.
Wow,
I was.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you take that conversation? If you look back, I know it was some time ago, but putting yourself back in a younger version of you, what was that conversation like? Was it it's up to you, Paul, whatever path you want, or was there were you sensing a bit of a desire that you come in?
There was a lot of, I'll call, family pride in having started both my grandfathers, two successful small businesses, and surviving and sending their kids to college, first generations of families that went to college. So there was a lot of pride there, and that was hard to put blinders on too. Actually, going to work was not a lot of fun after being in college and working in investments and actually doing pretty well. But so I ended up with the pay cut and doing a lot of menial, repetitive tasks that were rather boring at the time, but rather important to understand when it comes to running a business and understanding costs and how things work in manufacturing.
And I think for any of us that grew up around the family business, we understand that you don't typically start at a high level. You start at, so to put my journey in a little bit of time context, my dad would say, how about if you come in and help collate press kits? And like, how many are there? And it's like 250. And like rolling my eyes, he's like, how about if I get you a Star Wars figure? Will that help?
Yeah.
And I'm
So you
like,
were younger than that,
sold.
probably. Yeah.
You got
Yeah, I
me.
think I was getting apple turnovers or something on a Saturday to make it a
So,
little bit nicer.
so when you first came into the company and said, okay, I'm going to redirect my path instead of this path in investments, I'm going to go into the family business. What was like your initial role? Well, how would you characterize your first role when you got there? I know you were doing repetitive stuff, but what was your role at the
It
start?
was really being an apprentice. I was
Yeah.
learning to be a machinist. I was learning to fabricate parts with the different tools of the trade, which were shears and brakes and punch presses and welding, spot welding and arc welding and milling machines and lathes and drill presses, deburring machines,
Yeah.
material handling. It was just really, and fortunately, there were good people who'd spend their lives in the business and they understood what it took to, they'd been through an apprenticeship. So I really did learn to read drawings and to lay out parts and to complete jobs.
So when you started there full time, it sounds like you were somewhat under the oversight of your father, but it sounds like there were other people involved too that you were learning from
Well,
alongside.
sure, there were probably 30 people on the shop floor at any time. So depending on what department, I was told whatever jobs they needed done, you're going to do this today, and here's how you do it. And basically, it was like a department lead would show me what to do. And ultimately, I was setting up CNCs, and they were fed by punched paper tape at the time with the data that they
Yeah.
needed to put the right punch into the right location on the sheet metal and to finish the parts. But yeah, it was basically basic apprenticeship and go learn. This is really what I was told.
So what was it like working in the same environment as your dad? What was that like?
My dad worked in the office. He was estimating and scheduling and dealing with customers, and I was out there executing and making parts. It was fine. He did check on me from time to time, and although I felt I was underemployed in terms of what I could have been doing and earning versus what I was doing, I mentioned repetitive tasks. It was valuable, and I'm very thankful for having had the experience of my dad taking me under. And he also, maybe even on a day-to-day basis, tried to explain to me how the costs would affect the price and how being efficient on the floor would lead to profitability versus being inefficient or inaccurate would lead to rework, which is loss.
Yeah.
So it was very valuable to me. And as much as I didn't like doing repetitive tasks, that was the nature of the business. You have to make 100 pieces, and whatever you're doing, it has to get done 100 times.
I imagine that gave you more of a rounded perspective as you escalated into leadership because you could empathize with the people doing the work because you've done it. You could understand and speak their language. And if they maybe tried to tell you, hey, it can't be done this way, you could say, actually, I know it can be because I've done it.
Yeah, and ultimately there were, as my dad's business grew, he had purchased a couple other companies that were peripheral. One did spray painting and one did plastic molding. And if the company wasn't doing well, or when the company didn't do well, and I had enough experience of understanding manufacturing, not just the nuts and bolts of drilling holes, he actually said, I need you to go run this company. And it was under a different, it was in Newark and it wasn't in Springfield. And it was a different business. And I had to learn that business. And he suggested that I learn that business from the bottom up. So if it was spray painting, go learn how to spray paint. And if the metal parts had to be vapor degreased and phosphatized in a bath with an overhead hoist and gloves and safety glasses and a respirator, that's what I did. And I learned to run the business by understanding the inputs and the costs. And it actually worked out pretty well. I had a couple of those experiences with two different companies. So it, even though it felt like it was going pretty slowly, I was actually in a management role, and they were turnaround roles at the same time. I didn't have a lot of time to goof up.
Yeah. And that it would sound like your dad had incredible trust and faith in your abilities to do that, to both.
Yeah, I guess it didn't feel that way early on, but it ended up that way. And like I said before, I'm grateful for having had the training, even though it was not very glamorous.
Yeah. It was very rounded
Yeah,
though.
yeah, yeah. I
That,
had to wash my hands a lot and
yeah.
during the day.
Not everybody gets their hands on vapor degreasing. It's usually you don't hear that expression every day.
Or wait till you have to climb in the machine and clean it out once a year.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that's got to be fun.
yeah.
So I think a lot of the substances they use to do that work probably are not allowed anymore.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Somehow I survived, but
So along those early years, were there some other family members involved in the business as well?
there were. My dad and his sister acquired the company from their dad, who started the company, and so it turned into a second and then a third generation. So I had my two cousins, and we were playing musical chairs. Ultimately, we all came into the business at different times and with different
Mhm.
experiences and skill sets and all that stuff. So that's the other side of the family business that is tricky, I would say, to how do you keep everybody motivated? How do you keep everybody rewarded? How do you make it fair based on what you have been able to change and improve or generate profits?
Yeah.
And that's very difficult. And ultimately, it was the companies ended up, we broke the companies up, and we all, as we got into the third generation of ownership, we all took ownership of the company separately. So we weren't a group of three companies. We were now three separately owned companies by offspring
Okay.
family
Okay.
business, which was a solution because we're all still involved,
Yeah.
just
That's
separately. And so we succeed or fail on our own, and there are no decisions that have to be made by others in terms of who's going to get what
yeah.
compensation.
And it's not uncommon that sometimes business decisions are made for the good of the business, but also the good of the family. It's,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah,
the case.
I think we were all fortunate. We've all gotten through it and been able to keep our businesses, but you hear stories of families where the third generation didn't necessarily grow up in the business, but they're exposed to the wealth of the business, and it can become addicting and to take money out of the company when it's not doing well. And that's the hard part of business ownership, is that if the company doesn't do well, you don't do well. The life of an entrepreneur or small business owner is not always a raise every year. One
Right.
year doesn't necessarily get better after the next. Sometimes you have years where you go backwards because things, for whatever reason, don't go well.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
hard. And that's hard for some generations of people, just to think that they're allowed to take more out of the company just because they've been there for more time. It doesn't always work that way. And those are hard lessons. A lot of businesses fail for that reason.
Absolutely. That's very well said. Very well said. And we've certainly seen that happen. But it seems like in your case, cooler heads prevailed and said this is the best way forward, and that will keep the businesses intact and the family intact. It looks like it all worked out in the end, and all three are still operating. So that's a really good sign.
Well, sports teams are always a good analogy because they requires everyone to cooperate together to get a common goal, and yet you don't always win and you don't always succeed.
That's right.
It's just life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking about the time when you and your dad overlapped in the business, were there any core values or philosophies that he may have instilled in you that you still carry forward today, or maybe things that he would have often say or have said that resonate with you when you look back?
You can't fake competence. And that was something that maybe it wasn't said that way, but you have to really learn and be able to understand what everyone's going through. And if you see something that isn't right, you have to be able to show whoever needs to be taught. But it is a lot of coaching and growth. And if you're just there to take from the company, it's not going to do as well as if you're there to give and teach and learn. And
Well
I think
said.
that was one of the core concepts that maybe I didn't articulate the way my dad did it, but it's what I got. And certainly, and I still do. I still go out, and if something breaks, I get involved. And if something needs to get done, I get involved and change my shoes and roll up my sleeves and get to work with everybody else.
Yeah, a lot of consultants will echo the phrase, spend your time working on your business as opposed to in it. But I think the truth that I've experienced, and it sounds like you have too, is sometimes you have to do both.
Yeah.
Sometimes
And
you
you
have to do
have
both.
to, everybody makes mistakes, and you learn to come up with ways to prevent things from happening again. You have to ask questions. How did this happen? And sometimes, even though you have the answers, you want maybe other people to come up with the answers, and you have to propose the solution in the form of a question.
Sure, sure.
How can we prevent this from happening again? Because it was a loss, or it was a quality problem. And that's what it's about. It's about trying to accept that mistakes happen, but at the same time, create a way forward that everybody learns not to do things a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be sustaining, right? And not just for the moment, but
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
good.
Yep. Checklists work for pilots and airplanes, and recipes work for people making meals. And
Absolutely.
it's all the same.
And at Exothermic, you make some very complex meals.
But it's one of it's a very labor intensive business. It's not machine driven as much. And so it's cycle times that are not by the machine, but by the hand count, by labor. Some of it's like auto body work, but on plastic parts repetitively. We have to be pretty clear about understanding the most efficient way to get something done and compare it to a standard repeatedly so that the quality stays the same and while managing costs.
Always. As you were starting to take on more of the leadership role at Exothermic, how did that transition unfold? Like, how did that happen with your dad taking over for him?
He owned a company that owned two other companies, and one
Mhm.
of the companies wasn't doing well. I got to the point where he's like, "All right, go fix it." So it was survival, basically. Like if you can't swim, you get thrown in a swimming pool almost. And hey, guess what? You just learned how to swim. But it was really as simple as that. A little bit of coaching. You have to understand your costs. You have to make sure that you're documenting each step of the way, what the labor and material inputs are. And at the end of the day, when the job is done, you have to look at your margins, and you have to factor a level of profit into your pricing. Not all pricing is just cost based, but in manufacturing, it tends to be cost based because you're competing against other cost-based manufacturing companies. The real trick in manufacturing is to make things for less than they cost and have a fair price, and then beat your cost by being efficient and smart. And he coached me through that. He didn't really come to work with me at all. It was just like I kind of learned from how he did things in one business, which was fabricating metals, to another business, which was cleaning and decorating metals, paint and silk
Yep.
screening and things like that. And the other business that I'm in now was designing parts and molds so you could mold the parts and manufacture them reliably. And at the same time, fortunately, plastic products sometimes need sheet metal that goes on the inside, and oftentimes they get painted. So what I'd learned in the first couple of companies all translated very nicely into what we do here.
So how old were you when this transition took place? Like when you officially took on the title of president of Exothermic?
I was probably in my early 30s,
Okay.
late 20s was when I started
Yep.
doing that. And I was just an employee running a company for parent company. So it wasn't like I ended up running my own business. I was running a business for the family.
Okay.
And I did that for a couple different companies over a period of 5 or 6 years. And by the time we decided as a family that we wanted to split things up for the better future of all of us, I was in my early 30s.
Okay. Okay. So if
Married and with kids on the way, and the financial pressures were adding up.
yeah,
So there's plenty of motivation to succeed.
yeah, yeah, and that's a great point. And I can, so I'm the father of twins, they're now 20, but I vividly remember the moment after they were born and that jubilation of these little ones coming into the world saying, okay, now I'm responsible for four.
Yeah. And diapers are expensive.
And that was a real mind shift for me because when you're young, when you're just married or even when you're single, you sink, you swim, it's on you. So now it's on the family. And that definitely, in my mind, raised the stakes. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got to work hard, not just for me, I got to work hard for us.
Yeah.
That's a game changer.
Yeah, it's a job, but it's more than a job because
Yeah,
you're making the business has to succeed. And it could be not even your fault if the business doesn't succeed. So you feel like you're very exposed.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you look back and you've had this amazing journey and really a very uncommon upbringing in the business, the way that you were able to be exposed to so much so fast and at comparatively a very young age. Is there any moment or moments that stand out for you that say, wow, I've got this, or I can do this, or where you just kind of had that boost of confidence or passion for the business? Was there a moment or two that stands out?
And certainly there's the reward, the internal reward that you feel when you've succeeded and you can see that you're generating profits. And then there's the frustration that those profits are not, you're not able to reap those profits because they're going to the owner of the company. But certainly there was a lot of growth and pride in the fact that, yes, you can make a difference and succeed. Also, from year to year, things do change, and it's not always just an escalator ride up. It's not,
Yeah,
you got to be able to adjust. So sometimes you realize that you're fallible and you have to come back and take a different approach sometimes.
absolutely. Absolutely. And in your industry, if there's one thing that's certain, it's change. Your industry has seen a number of shifts and changes across your journey. So, looking at exothermic, how have you been able to evolve and adapt to meet the changes and challenges in the industry, whether it be technologically, culturally, operationally? How do you rise to the challenge of the day in your industry?
One thing that happened during my time was offshoring of manufacturing. A lot of the manufacturing left the country, went to Mexico or Europe or especially China and Japan in some cases. And there were a lot of dynamics that were changing where one manufacturing job could support a family with only one person working. And that ultimately changed to, in many cases, required both spouses to work, which is really more like where we are now in many cases. And the whole financial situation of work changed a lot. It was combined with offshoring a lot of manufacturing and the jobs, the skill level, the people left. We lost a lot of skilled people to higher paying jobs. And it was a very difficult time. And it's that we're seeing now maybe a little bit of onshoring and a little bit of renewed emphasis on being able to make things. And certainly technology has been playing into that with additive manufacturing and computerized assistance in design and generative manufacturing and generative design. So I don't know, did I answer your question or did I get off onto a tangent? I
No,
lost.
you were heading there, talking about, how exothermic is responding to the challenges and the changes of the day.
Yeah,
You were talking about this onshoring or reshoring move, I should say, and how that before that was pushing a lot of either talent away or know-how in different directions. It sounds like it's
yeah.
coming back.
Yeah, thank you for putting me back on track. And what ultimately happened, there were numerous times when our sales were cut in half due to business leaving the country, not having done anything wrong, but the customer just moved out of the country and the work's going to Mexico, or the work's going to Italy or Ireland or China or Japan. And all of a sudden you just have half the work that you used to have through no fault of your own. And that is very humbling. And so you have to do some soul searching and you have to think outside the box. What else can I do? And
Mhm.
really, you have to invest whenever you can. You have to invest in your company. You have to invest in yourself and you have to try new things. And so we've done that. Even now we're refocusing on CNC machining and developing our staff to do better with in-house machining because we can, there's new methodologies and methods to make molds or technologies to make molds. And we've invested in additive manufacturing. We've invested in the software for design and CNC machining, and we're invested in reverse engineering through laser scanning. And instead of measuring with calipers, now you can measure with lasers. And so we've been doing a lot of new things. We're investing in new materials. And it's really the philosophy that I saw my dad invest in a lot of new computerized equipment when it was coming out. And he always did mention that he's investing money in the company to maintain a competitive advantage and to
Mhm.
have a future. So that's something that I've realized, and we're actively doing it and still doing it. It's a very important facet of at least being in the manufacturing world, is investing in new technologies. Things change all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so in a space where there's lots of competition, there's big competitors, what sets a firm, a specialized firm like Exothermic apart? Like, how do you set yourself apart from the bigger competitors of the field of competition?
Yeah, we're first of all, we're in a niche. We're in a small business. We don't have a lot of competitors. It's good news and bad news. But the bottom line is being very efficient and very good, very skilled at certain core competencies and getting parts out the door every day. And certainly we follow quality manufacturing standards, and when we're constantly training people and retraining. So I certainly it's actually trying to be better and more cost efficient and faster. Speed is certainly a competitive advantage, and high quality is as well. And on top of all that is finding out what problems your customers need to solve and putting yourself in a place where you can contribute. And sometimes it's really hard to do that from at your desk. You have to be
Yeah.
on site and see what they're doing and asking questions, and everyone's looking for a better way to do things and looking for help. And we found that doing value-added assembly, incorporating other products into our molded products, was a win-win for our customers. And we were able to add more value to our products and get more revenue at the same time.
Yeah, commanding more of the supply chain in a sense. You had a advantageous position, I would think.
Yeah, yes, and the customers, it's a win-win because we can do it more effectively and cost effectively than they can with a lot
Sure.
of overheads.
Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah.
I always like to ask this question. So along the journey, did you ever have a moment where you just said, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Did I make the right choice? Did you have that moment, or did you always feel pretty committed once you said, yes, I'm joining, I'm good to go?
Yeah, I think from day one I had questions about it. It wasn't very glamorous working in a shop and getting dirty and working with your hands, a lot of working with your hands, and it wasn't very
Yeah.
glamorous. And I really did question myself, but I was a little bit more patient than some people might have been, and it does get more and more rewarding. And I know there's a learning curve no matter what you're doing. Even now, every once in a while, someone says, "Hey, I'd like you to consider selling your business." Okay, I'll consider it. But then, even if the price is right, the question is, what am I going to do with myself? And I'm happy with what I'm doing. So far, so good. So
Yeah.
far, so
Yeah.
good. Yeah, yeah.
So,
I'm glad I've stuck. I'm glad I've stayed with it.
yeah. And it's been quite a ride, right?
And you're
And
not supposed to compare yourself to others, right? You're just supposed
so
to look at your own perspective and how you're doing within your own self.
lots of my therapist tells me all the time, but I don't know.
There's
So
always the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, and you have to realize that.
that's right. In a moment of low, I was talking to my brother, who was a very successful entrepreneur in his own right. Recently sold his company for a lot of money. But years ago, I was having this bad day, and I called up my brother Gary, and I said, I don't know why I bought Dad's business. I don't know, this is crazy. This business is nuts. And I was just having a bad day. And so he said, why did you buy it? And I said, at that moment, I said, to make money. And he goes, you were stupid. And I said, why is that? He said, you want to make money, you got into marketing. If you wanted to make money, you should have gotten into investing or banking or financial services. That's where all the money is. You got into marketing. He said, I think maybe you did it because you love it and because you're good.
Yeah.
And he brought me back down to center and said, okay, good point. Well played.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to do what you enjoy.
Yeah. So a lot of our listeners are at that crossroads, Paul, where they're young and they're looking at the family business and they're asking that question, do I join or do I go my own path? What advice might you give somebody that's at that juncture?
Yeah, it's a really hard question of how do you evaluate what you want to do with your time? And it can't just be fun. A lot of people do find a lot of enjoyment in it, but it has to be a challenge, and it has to be a challenge that you can work through, or a series of challenges that, I learned that I have the ability. When you're looking at molded parts, you have to, before they're molded, you have to be able to look at them conceptually, in spatially inside your own brain, and understand how you would make a mold to make the part. And so I learned that I was pretty good at spatial thinking, and that was pretty rewarding when I was actually, but it didn't happen all by itself. You have to apply yourself. And I think you have to be patient with yourself and understand where you fit and what some of your strengths are, and know that it's not always going to be fun, but all in all, it has to be rewarding. You have to find satisfaction in, at the end of the day, that you move the ball forward a little bit. And even though you get pushed around, that you've made a difference. And
Yeah.
even if it's just, for a small company of 20 or 30 people, if you've made a difference for the company, you've made a difference for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, it's also your customers that have found value in you. So, yeah, who are the stakeholders? The employees and the customers are both, and it's a balance of the three of you. It's yourself, your customers, and your employees.
Yeah, absolutely. Said. So you mentioned this before. You've entertained some offers to buy Exothermic, yet you've turned them down. So what's motivating you? What's driving you still to keep the company moving forward and stay on course in its current form?
I just don't think I'm done. I just think that I have energy inside me to try to keep going and do more. And things are changing a lot. The world's changing faster and faster, it seems. And I find that very interesting and very opportunistic about just leveraging the change that's going on to incorporate into the company and to help more people.
Yeah, same,
Yeah.
same. I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I don't want to be, I just don't know how I'd be happier doing nothing. It wouldn't make me happy, I don't think. So I'm happy
Yes,
I have a nice balance in my life where I do work sometimes 7 days a week to a certain extent. And
sure.
you're always trying to learn, and you're always trying to lead and inspire others. And it feels good.
That's awesome. And if there's one thing that I think if I were to pull a strand across our conversation today, the value and importance of learning, both in your life, in your journey, and for Exothermic, seems to be quite high in terms of priority. You mentioned that several times, the advantage of learning, that taking the time to learn or to teach as being something of some of the secret sauce of Exothermic and how it remains competitive and a great company to this day.
Yeah. Yeah. What one of my grandfathers said to me was, whatever you learn, no one can take away from you.
Yes, I heard the very same sentiment once when I was debating going to a conference. I'm like, I don't really have the time, but it's a really good value, but I don't want to take the time away. And a mentor of mine says, when did learning something new ever hurt you?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'm going.
Yeah. So it's a good message for anyone that's
Yeah,
coming up through college or community college and learning a trade or learning a business, that if you enjoy what you're learning, and you can make a living at it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Looking to the future now for a moment, what's on the horizon for you for Exothermic? What's coming? What's next? What's something that's maybe exciting you right now that you're seeing?
We're looking at the possibility of getting more involved in composites manufacturing, which composites is adding for anything to a material. Like fiberglass is a composite material.
Mhm.
So adding carbon fiber to the resin of the plastic that we're molding would make composites. And that's really a trend in manufacturing, is towards composites, lightweighting, improving strengths. And we're seeing opportunities to provide more value into our marketplace with even new customers in composites. So that's the direction that currently we're considering.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Wow. There's always something new going on at Exothermic, it sounds.
Yeah, there's a lot of new things going on. Now you can spray paint something that makes your part look like chrome. You've seen the new football helmets. They're all chromy and shiny, and they're not
Yeah.
chrome. They're plastic. And you get on TV, and people are asking you if you can do it, and you have to figure it out. And so we're learning to do all kinds of interesting things, and that's rewarding.
Yeah, and the answer, of course, is yes. Of course, we can do that. Now let's
We can
go
try.
figure it out.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what if we had something that I felt really strongly about, we're good at making things. And if we don't have our own product, we
Yeah.
make other people's products, and we're always being asked, can you do this? Can you do that? And the answer is, yeah, let's work on it a little bit, and then we'll get there.
Figure it out. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Last question. So for anybody that's interested in learning more about you or more about exothermic molding, what's the best way for them to connect?
We have a website that we maintain, and we're constantly posting blog posts on our site and on LinkedIn as well. But our website is exothermic.com, exothermic.com. And that's a good way to see what's going on.
Awesome. Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for sharing your story and for taking the time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Happy to be with you, Ed. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Again, we've been speaking with Paul Steck, President of Exothermic, and I'm your host, Ed Delia. Thanks so much for joining us here at Growing Up B2B, and have a wonderful day. Thanks again, Paul.
Thanks, Ed.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.